Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. Today, we're taking a look at a case you probably think you know, Brown v. Board of Education. But we're not going to tell it as a simple hero's story. Instead, we're going to treat it as a fascinating case study in systems change. So, how does big social change actually happen? I think we all have a picture in our heads, right? This idea that history is made in these single, dramatic, lightning strike moments. And the common story of Brown versus Board fits that perfectly. You've got one heroic lawyer, one landmark court case, and boom, everything just changed overnight. But is that really how it went down? What if that simple story misses the real action, the complex, invisible machinery that was working just beneath the surface? So to really get what Thurgood Marshall pulled off, we first have to understand the system he was operating in. Think of it less like a courtroom drama and more like a giant machine with its own unique set of rules. Okay, and here's rule number one, and it's a big one. A court's main job, it's not actually just to deliver justice. Its primary function is to protect its own authority, its institutional legitimacy. It has to look principled, stable, and totally above politics to maintain its power. So right away, you've got this incredible tension. The stated goal, what's written on the tin, is justice. But the functional goal, what the machine is actually built to do, is maintain stability and preserve itself. And that right there is why the whole legal system is so incredibly resistant to big, sudden changes. Okay, so this is the environment Thurgood Marshall walks into. And this is why it's so important to see him not just as a lawyer, but as a brilliant systems engineer. He knew exactly how this machine worked. He and the NAACP legal team, they weren't just showing up to argue one single case. No way. They were running a multi-decade campaign. The whole point was to build this legal scaffolding, piece by piece, to force the institution to finally confront its own contradictions, to look at the gap between the promise of equality and the reality of segregation. And you can see exactly how they did it in their strategy. This was architected by the incredible Charles Hamilton Houston, and it was a masterclass in strategic patience. They didn't go for the whole thing at once. They started small, with winnable cases, challenging segregation in graduate schools where it was easier to prove inequality. They were carefully, deliberately, building the legal foundation they would need to eventually dismantle the entire separate but equal doctrine. All right, so after all that meticulous work, this long campaign finally culminates in the big one, a unanimous Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education. Just a monumental achievement. I mean, the ruling itself was a total landmark. The highest court in the land says, and I'm quoting here, "In the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. It's officially unconstitutional." So, on paper, it looked like the fight was over. They had won. But, and this is the crucial part of the story, that victory on paper did not translate to immediate change on the ground. Not even close. Instead, this massive gap opened up between the court's ruling and its actual enforcement, a gap that would last for a very, very long time. So what happened? Why wasn't a unanimous Supreme Court ruling enough to actually desegregate schools? Well, it goes back to that core idea. Systems are designed to protect themselves. They adapt to resist change and preserve the status quo. And that's exactly what the system did. It adapted. Once the explicit rule, separate but equal, was taken off the books, the battleground just shifted. Segregation continued, but it was done through new, more subtle, seemingly neutral procedures. Things like local school board policies, housing boundaries, and sneaky funding mechanisms that all achieved the exact same outcome. Just let that sink in for a moment. For more than 10 years, a full decade, after the Brown decision, there was still almost no meaningful school desegregation in the South. The system had just found a workaround. It had evolved to keep the old order in place. And this brings us right to the heart of our analysis today. The real lesson here isn't just about a single court case. It's about a deep, fundamental misunderstanding of how change actually works. Okay, so what is the crisis in perception here?
It's that we mistake legal permission for social transformation. We see a court ruling and think it's an automatic switch for change, when it's really just a permission slip. It creates an opening, but it overlooks the huge structural gap between that ruling and its real-world implementation.
And this is exactly why that gap exists. Courts don't operate in a vacuum. A ruling has to get filtered through all these other interconnected systems, the political system, the economic system, the media, And of course, the bureaucracy on the ground that has to actually do the thing. So if a court ruling is just the first step, what else does it take? Well, for systemic change to actually stick, a legal victory has to align with public narratives and, crucially, with the capacity and will to enforce it. Marshall's brilliant legal work kicked the door open, but it took immense pressure from all of those other systems to actually force society to walk through it. For a deeper systems-level analysis, see the full deep dive linked below. Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.